Hi friends, it's Taylor. Welcome back to the channel where I share my financial self-care journey using Monarch Money. I make videos on monthly budget reviews, financial planning, money goals, and other lifestyle content that all connects to my goals of being financially independent. So if that's something you're interested in, be sure to join our community by subscribing and hitting the bell. Today, I'll be walking you through my process of reconciling my bank account balance with Monarch at the end of the month. And towards the end of the video, I'll share some tips for doing this on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. But first, let's answer the question, what is a rollover? A rollover is the amount of money you have remaining at the end of one cycle that will apply to or roll over to the next cycle. And that cycle can be either the first to the last day of the month, or it could be based on a pay period such as weekly or bi-weekly. Monarch does have a built-in rollover feature, but it is for expenses only, which means if you have leftover money from a particular spending category, it will carry that over into the next month. To demonstrate this, I am going to go back to December 2023 and scroll down here, and we see that I budgeted $300 this month for food, but at the end of the month, I only ended up spending $200, which means there is $100 left over. Right now, the rollover feature is not turned on. So if we go to January, we see that we have no budget amount and no remaining amount because this particular budget amount of $300 only applied to December. But if we want to roll over this $100 into January so that we have an increased amount here, then we need to turn on the rollover feature. We're going to go back, and next to the food category, we're going to click the gear icon and turn on make this category a monthly rollover. Once we turn this on, we're going to select the current month that we are in, so that's December 2023, and the starting balance is 0, and we will click save. Now we have this circular arrow that has appeared next to the $100 mark, and when we hover over it, we have this little pop-up window that shows the total amount that was rolled over from last month, and then we have our budget, actual, and remaining. This makes sense because we have 300 minus 200, and that's $100 left over. But when we move forward to January, we'll see that we still have this $100, and in the pop-up window, we see rollover from last month. So this means that whatever the amount that we give our budget in the food category in January, it will add this $100 to it because it rolled over the extra money from last month. So if I change this to $300 for January, we now have $400 because it's the $300 that we assigned to it this month, and then it adds the $100 that we rolled over from last month, and that gives us a total of $400. Now, the reason that I don't use this method is because I want to reconcile my exact leftover amounts in Monarch with my bank by just looking at one particular number or category. And it's hard to do that if I have multiple leftovers in different categories spread out through my entire budget. So then there's more manual work in terms of reconciling that. But when I keep all the money here in my left to budget up top, or if I keep it in one particular category line item, it's easier for me to just check that single number and see if it matches up with my bank. Now, before we start talking about how I have customized my Monarch structure to account for bank balance rollovers, I want to head over to my Google Sheet and talk about my pay cycles. So I have this quick little setup in Google Sheets to just demonstrate what my pay cycles are currently. I've talked about my pay periods in many of my monthly budget reviews and other videos, but I wanted to bring it up again since I feel like it's really relevant to the things we're going to be talking about in this video. So in a given month, we have about 30 days, and out of those 30 days, I get paid on the exact same 2 days every month, the 5th and the 20th. Technically, from a monthly overview perspective, the paycheck on the 5th covers everything between the 5th and the 19th, and the paycheck on the 20th covers everything between the 20th and the last day of the month. But as you can see, I don't really have any income coming in for the first 4 days of the month, and this is where I've decided to give my rollover a job, which is to cover my expenses for these first few days of the next month until I get paid again on the 5th. Everyone is going to have different reasons for how they use their rollover. Regardless of the reason, we need to let Monarch know that there is still money in our bank account that isn't just just going to disappear when the first of the month hits. It's going to be money that we can spend or save, and we need to give it a job so that Monarch knows that this is still part of our monthly spending money. And in Monarch, that is going to look something like this. We need to have a category under the income section that shows we have rollover from last month. Then we need to have another category under the income section for any of our traditional income. So this would more than likely be your paychecks from your job, or this could be business income. Then we need to have one category or multiple categories for all of our expenses. And then we need to have another category under the expenses group that counts the rollover from this month that will apply to next month. As long as we have these 4 categories, Monarch will understand the cash flow that is going on, and it won't look like we are making more than we're spending or vice versa. And with this structure explained, we are going to head over into Monarch and talk about how we can translate these particular needs into our budget setup. So I'm here on the settings page in Monarch, and I hit the categories tab. These are the categories that we are going to be using for today's video. Obviously, you can cater these categories to your needs, but I wanted to keep it simple so that we understand how the cash is flowing from one month's rollover to another. So I have categories for both of my paychecks, and then we have a category called last month's rollover, which is when we're going to check our bank balance from last month and see how much was in our bank account on the last day. On the same note, we have a category under expenses called this month's rollover. So at the end of this month, we're going to check our bank balance and see how much we have and put that number in this category. And then for the monthly expenses group, I kept it simple with categories that I think are pretty common, which is rent, food, gas, and phone. Now we're going to head over to the budget page, and we can see all of these categories that we created: our paycheck, our rollover line items, and then all of our monthly expenses. Let's start by entering some example data so we can see how this works. So let's say for the first paycheck of the month, I got $3,000. And then for the next paycheck, I got another $3,000. And to switch between the line items, I am just hitting the tab key on my keyboard. And we can see in the top right that our left to budget, or total amount that we need to assign a job, is $6,000, which makes sense because 3,000 plus 3,000 is 6,000. Now for this last month's rollover line item, this is going to be a placeholder, which means that no transactions are actually going to come in and out of this group. But by typing in a number here in the budget column, we are still giving that money a job so that we don't accidentally assign that money to other categories when it was supposed to come here. So let's say on the last day of December 2023, which was last month at the time of this video, we checked our bank balance and we had $200 in there. The best way to do this is to log into your bank account and check your balance. But since this is an example, I am just going to pretend like it's here in Monarch. So I'm going to go to the Accounts tab, and looking at this example checking account, we see that my balance at the end of December was $200. So we're going to go back to the budget and type in $200 here in the last month's rollover. Because we have entered this money as part of the budget, we are telling Monarch that in addition to the $6,000 that we plan to make from our job, we also have $200 of leftover unspent money from December that we want to use as spending money this month. And the only way to let Monarch know that is by giving it a place in our budget, and that's what this line item is for. And that gives us a total of $6,200 that we actually can spend this month. Now we're going to scroll down to the monthly expenses group and set some monthly budget amounts for these categories. So let's say we budget $4,000 for rent, $1,000 for food, $500 for gas, and another $500 for a phone. I've added some example transactions, and we are going to pretend like this is the last day of January and we are reviewing our budget to see our actual spending as compared to our budgeted amount. So for rent, we budgeted $4,000 and spent $4,000. And because there is $0 remaining, that means we have zeroed out that line item, which means that our actual matched up with our budget. For food, we budgeted $1,000, but we spent $1,200, which means we were $200 over budget. And for gas, we budgeted $500, but we only spent $300, which means we were $200 under budget. Even though our left to budget is in the green up here on the top right, we want to make sure that all of our categories have been zeroed out so that we understand exactly how much we have left to budget or our remaining money in a month. There are two ways that we can adjust these budgets so that they match up with the actual. The first is to simply type in whatever number is in the actual column. So if I type in 1200 here, we see that once I do that, it matches up with the actual and we have $0 here. The other way to do it is by clicking in the remaining column on that particular category. And if you click once, you'll get this little pop-up that allows you to transfer amounts quickly between categories. And because Monarch is smart, it looks at which categories you have underspent and which ones you have overspent, and it gives you those two categories here so that you can quickly move the money. So just by clicking on this remaining amount, Monarch already recognized that we had a category, which is gas, that had $200 left in the budget. And then it saw that we were over budget in the food category by $200, and then it put the amount here. So in this pop-up, Monarch is saying, hey, you have extra money in this gas category. Why don't we move that to the category that you overspent to make your budget more reconciled? So I'm going to click save, and we'll see that the amounts adjusted here. And now we can feel more confident when we go to reconcile our bank because this number is accurate and all of our categories are zeroed out. So we know that there's no money that's not accounted for. I've added our income transactions as well, and we can see that our budgeted income for the month matches up with our actual. We have zeros, so that means those categories are reconciled. However, for the last month's rollover line item, we'll see that we don't have an actual amount here that we can match up with. As I said before, no transactions are going to be coming in and out of this category, so there will never be an actual number, but we still want to have this number here so that Monarch knows it is a part of our monthly budget. So now that we have reconciled all of our categories, we can look at this number in the top right and check our bank account now at the end of this month and see if it matches up. So I'm going to head over to the accounts tab, and we will see that I do in fact have $200 left over in my bank account. So that means that we have fully reconciled our bank balance with Monarch. If for whatever reason, when you go to check your bank account balance, it does not match up with your left to budget in Monarch, you want to check all of your categories and make sure that where possible, they have zeros next to each of them, because that means that your budget matched up with your actual. You also want to see if you have any pending transactions in your bank that are not showing up in Monarch yet. Monarch is just a read-only software, and sometimes it takes a while to sync your data between your bank and Monarch. And if you have pending transactions in your bank that are affecting your balance, but they're not here in Monarch yet, those numbers may not match up. You also want to check your transactions and see if you have any transfers that were not accounted for here in your budget. In my zero-based budget Monarch video, I talked about how the goals section down here only shows transfers between accounts that have been assigned to a goal. If you have not assigned a transfer to a goal or have not given any kind of placeholder category for that in Monarch, then that could be skewing your results between your bank balance and Monarch. So if I click into this example checking account, we see that my bank balance is $200. But let's say that at some point in January, I transferred $50 out of my checking account into a savings account. More likely than not, you'll be having your checking account automatically sync with Monarch, but because I am showing an example, I'm going to create these transactions manually so you can see the cash flow. So I just created this transaction, which shows that at some point in January, we transferred $50 into our savings account. Now, originally our balance was $200, but because we made that transfer to a separate account, our balance went down $50 and we now have $150 remaining in our bank. If we go back to our budget, we see that our left to budget, which is the amount that should be in our bank account, is $200. And this is an example of how your bank balance could not be syncing up with Monarch. So in order to address this discrepancy, we need to show Monarch that a transfer was made, and we need to account for it here on the budget page. There are two ways that you can do this. you can create a placeholder category and put the $50 in there so that this balance goes down by $50. So I'm going to create that example category really quickly by going to Settings, Categories, and we'll just create it under this group and call it Savings Transfer and click Save. Now we're here on the budget page and we can see that category we created called Savings Transfer. So what we're going to do is just type in 50 and it has reduced our left to budget by $50, and we are letting Monarch know that we have assigned 50 of those dollars to a transfer that is not necessarily showing up on the budget page, but we want to account for it. And now if we check this $150 and compare it to our bank balance, it is matching up, so that means we did it correctly. Another way to do this is to connect your transfer transaction to a goal, and then it would show up on the budget page just down here in the goal section. So let's create that and see what that looks like. The first step is to make sure that whatever savings account we are connecting to a goal is already in Monarch. So we're going to head over to the accounts page. And for this example, I haven't connected my savings account yet. So I'm going to add a manual account and we'll call this example savings. And we're going to make the type savings. And let's say there's just no money in there right now. And we click save. Now that our savings account has been connected to Monarch, we're going to head over to the goals page and create a goal for it. I talk about this in detail in my sinking funds video, so be sure to check that out if you want a step-by-step tutorial, but I'm going to kind of breeze through it in this video. So we'll call this savings and we'll say that we want to save 1,000 and we're going to add the savings account that we connected to Monarch. And we'll scroll down to done, click next and click next again. And now we have our first savings goal. So when we click into the savings goal, we see that there are no transactions, and that is because we created this savings account as a manual example. So there are no transactions added here, but once you connect a automatically syncing savings account to Monarch, your transactions would pop up here. I am going to head over to the transactions page so you all can see what's going on with the transactions. So here we have the same transaction that I showed before. This is a transfer from our checking account to our savings account in the amount of $50. I'm going to add another transaction showing the money go from the checking account to the savings account. But again, if you already have connected all of your accounts to Monarch and they're syncing up, you won't have to manually add these transactions. I'm just doing them for the sake of the video. So I'm going to add a transaction, make this $50, and we're going to make this a credit because it's an increase in the amount. And we'll say that this is going to the savings account. And we will also categorize this as a transfer. Adjusting the account balance just makes sure that Monarch shows that the balance actually goes up $50 instead of it saying at 0. So we will click add transaction. And now we have two transactions. One is from the checking account going to the savings. So that's a withdrawal. And then another transaction is from the savings account and it is depositing the $50 that we just transferred. Now on the same section, if we scroll down to the goal dropdown, we have the option to connect this to the savings goal. And remember, we just created that and linked it to our savings account, which is why we have the option to do that. So I'm going to click savings and exit out of this. And when we go to our budget and scroll down, we'll see that we have a category under the goal section in the amount of $50, which is exactly how much we transferred into our savings. So by updating the budgeted amount to match the actual, which is $50, we'll see that this is zeroed out and the left to budget has also gone down to 150, which is the number that we want. And we can double check that by going to our account and we see that it matches with the balance that we have in our checking. Now we just have two final steps that we need to do in Monarch to make sure we are correctly accounting for this rollover. So the first thing we're going to do is take this 150 and put it in this month's rollover, because this is the amount of money that was left over at the end of this month, and that's how much was in our bank account. So we're going to type in 150 and now we have 0, which means it's a zero-based budget and there's nothing else we need to do for this month. Then we're going to head over into the next month, and in the income section where it says last month's rollover, we're just going to type in the same number that we had from this month's rollover of the previous month. So for January 2024, Our rollover for this month was 150, so we're just going to copy this, go into February, and paste it here in the last month's rollover section. And of course, you can go through the rest of the month and make sure everything is budgeted properly, but that is all that we need to do in terms of the rollover. I'm going to switch to the forecast view just to show you what's going on. You can see that for January, we had $150 left over, and then we're telling Monarch that this 150 is just going to apply to February, and that's why we put it here. And we'll continue to do the same thing for future months. So whatever amount we had left over for February, we'll just put that here. And then when February is over and we're going into March, we'll just take the same number and paste it into the March line item. The last thing I wanted to do is show how you could apply these month-to-month reconciliations, but do it on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So I have a similar setup to what I had earlier in the video, but instead I have grouped my expenses into different subgroups. So I have paycheck 1 and paycheck 2. Or you could rename this to week 1 or week 2, whatever works for you. In this scenario, I spent $4,000 on my rent, and it looks like I over budgeted for food, so I actually have $200 left over. So on the day before my next pay cycle begins, which in this case would be the second paycheck, I would just reconcile these line items to make sure they're zero. So I would type in 1,200 to make it match up with the actual. And now we have zeros in this group, so we know we're reconciled. And now we have an extra $200 left over to budget. We can take this $200 and apply it to other goals. So you can either apply it to other expenses you have in paycheck 2, or you can scroll down and maybe assign it to some savings goals. And you would just continue to do this on whatever pay cycle you decide until you have $0 at the end of each cycle. So in this case, because we have $200 left over, let's put that all to our savings. So we will type in 200. And now we are back to a zero-based budget. We have given every dollar a job for paycheck 1, so we'll collapse that category. Now that paycheck 2 is over and we're waiting for the third paycheck, we would just reconcile the budget and actual, change this to 300. And we can see we have an extra $200 left over again at the end of this paycheck. And maybe we want to put that to savings again. So we would increase this by 200 and we're back to 0. And then at the end of the month, you would follow the same steps of looking to see how much is in your left to budget, and you would check your bank account, make sure it matches up, and then you would do the same thing for all the months and paychecks to come. All right, everyone, that is it for today's video on reconciling your bank balance with Monarch. I hope that this tutorial was as in-depth as it needed to be, but if you still have questions, you can either leave me a comment down below, or you can head over to my website, pennotpaper.com/book, and we can go through everything on a one-on-one session. In the next video, I will go over... Wow, Coda, I'm trying to record. In the next video, I will show you how I create my rollover plan, which is giving the money that I assign to next month a particular job so that I know exactly what I'm going to do with it in a month. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.